You know what's scary? Building a good team from the ground up. But even when you have everyone in place, you need Monday.com Work OS to bring it all together. It's a unified platform that teams like ours use to run all of our work projects. Monday.com gives you one single source for information and makes it easy to build totally custom workflows that fits your needs. To create our podcasts and videos, we have writers, illustrators, and editors all working on one project at the same time. With the visual ease you get with Monday.com, it supercharges your team efficiency, enabling everyone to focus on what matters most and helping meet their goals faster. Monday.com Work OS is good for small crews like we have at Something Scary, but it also feels like it could fit any team size or even industry. And with Monday.com, I can see what everyone on our team is working on. No check-in necessary. Teams are more productive when they work together. Tap into the magic of your team with Monday.com Work OS. Sign up for your free 2-week trial at Monday.com today. That's Monday.com Work OS. Sign up for your free 2-week trial today. Are you looking for new podcasts? Then you will want to listen to Poe. It's a new Stitcher Premium exclusive podcast from the team that brings you Ashley Flowers and Crime Junkies. Edgar Allan Poe is known as the original king of scary, and his 19th century stories can still evoke just as much fear 200 years later. He's one of my personal favorites, and I reread The Raven every October. Each week, you'll get 2 new episodes. The first is the original retelling of the Poe story, read by actor Jake Weber. And in the second episode, you'll get a modern, reimagined version of the classic story so you can hear it in a whole new way. Poe is out now. Listen exclusively on Stitcher Premium. For a free month of listening, go to stitcherpremium.com/Poe. Click Start Free Trial, select a monthly plan, and enter the promo code POE. That's stitcherpremium.com/Poe. Promo code POE. Hello, my dark darlings. I'm Markia, and this is the Something Scary podcast. To our veteran listeners and those just voyaging into the dark with us for the first time, welcome. I hope you've been enjoying our special guest readings this month. Today is the last episode before Halloween, and we are thrilled and honored to have Tanana Reeve Dew read a story for us later in the episode. I am a huge fan of Miss Dew, along with her many accomplishments as an award-winning author, such as The Good House, a novel, and her African Immortal series, beginning with My Soul to Keep. She's a film historian with amazing discussions online on a variety of horror topics, including a segment released by the new Candyman movie. She's an executive producer of Horror Noir, a history of Black horror, and currently teaches Black horror at UCLA. If you're listening, then you're one of those people who love a good scare. And that means Halloween is your time of year. It's ours too. We get a thrill from losing our breath as our blood pumps extra fast through our veins. We delight in stories of witchcraft, fairies, and other mythical folklore, knowing, praying deep down that the tales we hear may be real. But the reality is, when we're faced with these things in real life, that good scare may scare us to death. First, fairy tale wishes haunt your days, followed by Dante's hellfire. Then, it's the little things that can kill you. Finally, in our featured story, no matter where you hide, horror will find you. I receive hundreds of creepy story submissions every single week, and of those, the scariest ones make it into our podcast, along with the story that we've chosen to animate and post over at youtube.com/snarled. If you have a tale you're dying to share, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. If you'd like to support Something Scary, then consider joining our Patreon. As a patron, not only can you help the show and see ad-free episodes, but you can also be a part of the horror and hear your name featured in one of our podcasts or weekly video stories. Visit patreon.com/snarled. So, want to hear something scary? Scared to death. Be careful what you wish for. The reality of the situation you want is often disappointing and can go from fantasy to nightmare in an instant. Like in this story written by Diablo, Guapo, and Belle. Darlene was enamored with romantic stories of fairies. She'd read everything about leprechauns, pixies, and elves. If it had pointy ears or dainty wings, chances were she knew all about it. Despite her obsession, her granny always told her,
"Beware, child. Never trust the fae. These tiny, dark fairy folk bring all manner of mischief to you."
But at least then she'd have a friend and some excitement, Darlene thought. Her family had just moved to a town outside of Liverpool, and it was difficult to meet people. That was until she was sat in the library reading a book about goblins, and a teen sat down next to her with a text about realism and fairy tales. Swallowing her shyness, Darlene asked her about the book, and Vashti told her she loved researching folklore. The teens clicked, and before long were sharing stories about woodland wonders. One day after school, Vashti took Darlene aside and told her a secret. She knew where they could find real fairies. Darlene felt her face becoming hot. She didn't like being mocked, but Vashti insisted she was serious. They agreed to meet at the edge of the woods at sundown. There, Vashti would prove she was telling the truth. Darlene was skeptical, but the idea of seeing real fae folk was too tantalizing. That night, she snuck out of her house. She met at the rendezvous point. Vashti was nowhere to be found. She started to suspect that her so-called friend really was poking fun at her. Just as she was about to leave, she heard her name called from the forest and spotted Vashti beckoning her. She followed without question, curious and excited. They must have walked for nearly an hour when Vashti stopped and pointed to the ground. There was a circle of mushrooms. "Cross through that fairy ring, and then you'll see," her friend claimed. Darlene rolled her eyes. Of course, she knew about fairy rings, and they were nothing more than a circle of mushrooms, but she decided to humor Vashti and followed the teen across the ring. At first, Darlene didn't see anything, but Vashti held out her hands, and they were instantly surrounded by tiny, glowing beings who floated down on gossamer wings. They gently flitted to and fro, giggling and landing on their shoulders. Darlene cooed in wonderment as a teeny fairy elegantly lighted upon her palm. Vashti admitted to finding them a long time ago, and next time she would bring her to their queen. But Darlene must promise to never tell anyone. That night, she could barely sleep. Darlene wished she could tell everyone. The following evening, the teens met at the same spot as before. Vashti led Darlene through a heavy wall of trees, the woods growing darker and darker, with just a light shining ahead. Darlene's heart leapt with anticipation. Finally, they reached a magnificent grove. The queen stood on the other side of a pristine pond, a path of polished stepping stones dotting the surface. She was wreathed with tiny fairy subjects, sparkling an array of golds and pinks and greens. She herself sparkled bright with silver speckles. She was the most beautiful thing Darlene could imagine. The warm lights of these wonderful little beings danced in circles around her. As she turned to thank her friend, she saw that Vashti was gone. As Darlene looked around for her, she noticed the pond had suddenly filled with duckweed, and the Queen of Fairies herself had also vanished without a trace. Even the little fairy subjects flickered into little balls of blue flames, giggling and whispering to one another. Darlene recognized them from her storybooks as will-o-wisps. Their blue glow cast an eerie, cold light upon the grove, the shadows stretching. Standing alone, Darlene was filled with a feeling of inescapable dread. She took another step on the stones before a gnarled hand shot up from the duckweeds and grabbed her ankle. She shrieked as the hand dragged her into the water. Cold water filled her lungs, and just as she began to choke, the hand let go, and she raced back to the surface. Sputtering out water, Darlene was trying to catch her breath when her shoulders were gripped by claw-like fingernails. She was in the clutches of a skeletal hag with putrid green skin. As it drew her closer, she could see its lips pull back into a sharp-toothed grin, its long hair dripping cold water onto her face. As it held her closer, its rank breath filled her with nausea. Darlene cried out in terror. She thought fairies were good and kind and gentle. The hag threw back its head as it cackled.
Good. Do you mistake me for Seelie, a blessed being? Stupid child, I'm the Unseelie, unholy and harbinger of doom.
It gestured a bony hand to a collection of will-o-wisps, lingering above like scavenging vultures. The Unseelie delight in bringing mortals torment and suffering. They're easy to trick with ignorant beliefs in Tinkerbells and fairy tales. Makes it easier for them to lure in gullible humans. Darlene and the hag, formerly known as Vashti, began to sink beneath the duckweed-covered surface, and the poor young teen suspected it would be for good this time. Before Darlene was dragged completely beneath the murky water, she could hear her wicked captor sneer.
Foolish mortal, never trust the Fae.
Thank you so much, Diablo, Guapo, and Belle, Bete, for this wonderful and horrific Fae story. How about you, listener? How would you be able to tell if someone is really a new friend or Fae? Have you ever had a spiritual experience you thought would be wonderful but turned terrible quickly? Like lots of people, I feel like in the past year and a half, I've had my extra share of anxiety and stress. I was working from home, my sleep was disrupted, y'all know what I'm saying. Filling out the Noom survey discussing my stress and goals was pretty in-depth. It feels like the program I've signed up for will really target my actual issues with stress and anxiety. I'm looking forward to what Noom can do for me. The Noom app is really easy to use, and it's backed by scientifically proven principles that teach you how to manage your stress and anxiety. A team of dedicated coaches are available 24/7 to support you, and there is a daily program that guides you all the way through. You are stronger than your stress. It doesn't get to control you. Equip yourself with the knowledge and skills to steer yourself to happiness. As experts in behavior change, Noom has helped millions of people through their weight loss program, so you know they can help you tackle stress too. All you need is 10 minutes a day, and it's an app, so it's there for you anytime, anywhere. Worry less and feel happier. Sign up for your trial at Noom.com/scary. That's NOOM.com/scary to sign up for your trial. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to hair care. I should know. A product that works for my hair when it's straight might make my natural hair look like a mess. I need something that controls my curls but also makes them shine. That is why I'm so excited to try Prose and fall back in love all over again with my hair. Prose makes custom hair care that's effective because it's personalized. First, Prose starts by asking about you as a person. Prose asks me really unexpected things like my personal eating habits and my zip code. I mean, of course, your zip code matters. The humidity in Florida is a big difference than the humidity in California. My hair feels that difference. As a carbon neutral certified B Corp, Prose is an industry leader in clean and responsible beauty. All their ingredients are sustainably sourced, ethically gathered, and cruelty-free. They're also the first custom beauty brand to go carbon neutral, and that is all really important to me. If you're not 100% positive Prose is the best hair care you've had, They will take the products back, no questions asked. Prose is the healthy hair regimen with your name all over it. Take your free in-depth hair consultation and get 15% off your first order today. Go to prose.com/scary. That's prose.com/scary for your free in-depth hair consultation and 15% off. Grief can often be all-consuming, leaving us feeling hollow and desperate. Sometimes those we think are here to help us are actually here to prey on us, like in this story inspired by Krish. After Rosanna's son, Jose, tragically drowned last year, she was struck with grief and had lost the feeling of love and excitement in her life. She was depressed and numb, walking through life like a zombie. As time went on, Rosanna joined a support group for those who had lost their children. Hoping that being surrounded by other grieving parents would help ease her own pain, she was disappointed when it didn't seem to work for her. After deciding that she would attend one last group meeting, she met someone new and was instantly drawn to him. His name was Stephen, and he had lost his 15-year-old daughter, Karina, in a car accident. He was the only parent in the group that had a sense of hope and optimism, seeming lighter than the rest of them. At the end of the meeting, Rosanna approached Stephen and asked him how he managed to be hopeful during such a dark time. Stephen responded by telling her that he had discovered a spiritual outlet that helped him harness his grief. Intrigued, Rosanna asked if he would be willing to share this newfound spiritual practice. He told her to come to his house tomorrow and he would share with her everything he had learned. The next day, with a newfound hope, Rosanna made her way to Stephen's house. She rang the doorbell, and as Stephen answered, she was hit with the smell of burning. Upon entering Stephen's home, she noticed that his house was covered in pictures of his daughter, Karina, and it felt like a giant shrine. Something about Karina's face gave Rosanna chills. She was a beautiful little red-haired girl, but her eyes were almost black, like a shark. The kindness that Stephen had spoken of about his daughter was not evident in these photos. However, Rosanna tried to ignore her gut feeling as Stephen led her into the kitchen where the burning smell was coming from. On the table was a pentagram carved into the wood, and in the center of it was a tiny fire. Stephen then grabbed from his cupboard a live pigeon in a cage and set it on the table by the fire. He explained to Rosanna that he was a member of the Dark Angel Society and that they perform rituals to connect with the spirit world and to give loved ones a few hours with their dead relatives. Rosanna was scared and anxious, but she was desperate for some relief and was willing to try anything. Stephen instructed Rosanna to cut open the pigeon's neck and stick it in the fire. He said it was the only way for her to bring back her son Jose, even if it was only for a few hours. Rosanna nodded obediently, and as she cut the pigeon's neck, blood splattered all over her. She was immediately overcome with a sense of love. Standing in front of her was Jose. He was soaking wet, still wearing the clothes he had drowned in. Stephen mentioned that the countdown to her time when Jose started now, and to cherish every moment. He then retreated and closed the door behind him. Rosanna ran up to Jose and hugged him as tightly as she could, whispering, "I love you to the moon and back." Something she had always said to him every night before bed. Jose said nothing. Instead, he asked his mom to cook him his favorite meal. As she turned to look in the cupboards, she felt a sharp pain in her back. When she spun around, there was Jose with a bloody kitchen knife in his hand. Before she could ask why, she fell to the floor and started to fade in and out of consciousness as as she bled out. Jose stood over her, and as he drew closer, his face began to morph into what looked like a young girl with red hair and shark eyes. Rosanna couldn't believe it. Jose was never here. It was always Karina. As Rosanna took her final breath, Stephen and Karina approached and thanked her for being their sacrifice. Now, they would be able to spend eternity together. Thank you so much, Krish, for inspiring this resurrection tale for us. Children aren't supposed to be creepy, although we do know our fair share of ones that are, don't we? Is there anything unusual that everyone else likes that you find to be creepy? How far would you go to be with a lost loved one? Can I say one thing to you? Dead places. It's not a no cell phone coverage area. It's the name of a series I'm enjoying on Sundance Now. Quick summary. London-based paranormal investigator Will Stone is the author of an international best-selling book series. After returning home to South Africa to investigate Africa's many ancient spirits and monsters, Will confronts the biggest mystery of his life: who or what murdered his sister when they were children. And of course, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But this is why I just got Sundance Now. Sundance Now has programming from all over the world, and I love discovering all these shows that we don't always get in the States. True crime, horror, all the stuff I love. Sundance Now is an ad-free streaming service created by AMC Networks. If you're like me, then Sundance Now is definitely for you. You can stream Sundance Now on all your favorite devices for as low as $4.99 a month. Just download the app or watch online and discover exclusive shows from around the world instantly. Start streaming your next obsession. Try Sundance Now free for 30 days by going to sundancenow.com and use promo code SCARY. That's sundancenow.com, code SCARY for 30 days of free streaming. sundancenow.com, code SCARY. As you know, we tell a lot of urban legends here on Something Scary. Stories like Bloody Mary, the Jersey Devil, and the Chupacabra are some of my favorites, which is why I'm really excited to tell you about Urban Legends with the Ghost Brothers, the first paranormal podcast from Discovery Plus. They're talking to people with actual personal experiences with urban legends. I listened to the episode on the Chupacabra, that blood-sucking dog-like creature that haunts farms, and they had someone on who'd actually encountered a Chupacabra as a child. Riveting. But they also bring a sense of humor to the storytelling, which makes it fun to listen to. If you don't already know them, the Ghost Brothers are paranormal investigators Dalen Spratt, Marcus Harvey, and Jawan Mass, have been hunting ghosts together for the past 6 years. And now they're getting deep into the urban legends with the help of top paranormal investigators, celebrities, and friends. Plus, some of your favorite podcast hosts like Dave Schrader of Darkness Radio and Derek Hayes of Monsters Among Us. There's some scary stuff out there, and we know you love getting scared. So listen to Urban Legends with the Ghost Brothers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My name is Tanana Reeve-Dew. I'm an author and an educator, and I'm reading Grief with Goblins. Goblins are in no way harmless woodland creatures. They are malicious and malevolent, stealing treasure and sometimes lives. Encountering one can have deadly consequences or even drive you to insanity, like in this story, inspired by Anda. After Anda's brother Kofi disappeared, vanishing without a trace, her parents were devastated. Police believed Kofi ran away, but Anda knew that her brother had been kidnapped by goblins. Anda had witnessed the brutal attack and kidnapping. She was only 13 years old at the time when she saw a group of terrifying small beings swarm Kofi. They slashed his face with their claws, tied him down with rope, and dragged him into their world. The last she saw of her brother, he was begging for his life as the goblins laughed in glee. She drew pictures of what the creepy creatures that kidnapped her brother looked like, sketching out small, bulbous figures with blood-red eyes, wrinkled skin, and razor-sharp teeth. Anda put her sketches all around her neighborhood, but no one believed her, and most thought she had created the creatures to deal with the trauma. One night, desperate to find her brother, Anda performed a ritual she had discovered online, meant to locate lost children. As she closed her eyes tightly, she felt the air in the room begin to shift and heard a strange noise from behind her. She spun around to catch the sight of little bodies racing into the next room, accompanied by a horrific screeching sound like an animal in pain. Rushing into the room, Anda felt her stomach drop. There were several of the ghastly goblins all plunging minuscule yet razor-sharp knives into her pet bunny, Bonkers. The last thing she heard before she let out a blood-curdling scream was the dying, gurgling breath of Bonkers and the triumphant cheers of its killers. The next day, she frantically tried to explain that it wasn't her who killed Bonkers, it was the creatures that stole Kofi. But her parents were concerned by their daughter's bizarre beliefs and challenging behavior. They wanted to help her and felt they'd exhausted all that they were able to offer. It was time to see the professionals and get her the support system she needed. 1 year of excellent therapy later, Anda still believed that Kofi's disappearance was due to goblins. However, she'd gotten really good at telling the doctors and her parents what they needed to hear, that fairy tales and goblins weren't real. It was enough to placate them and free her from their well-meaning but suffocating care. One day, as Anda was walking home, she passed by a metaphysical bookstore. The place was filled with crystals, charms, and other mystical relics. She stumbled upon a book in the back of the store that read, Nature Spirits, How to Connect with Woodland Folk. She read a passage that explained that when a goblin steals something from you or kidnaps someone, the only way to get it back is to make a trade with them. That evening, Anda decided she would trade herself for her brother. She lit some candles, surrounded herself with sweets and candles in the hopes to entice the creatures. She then whispered the spell and waited for contact. Suddenly, a sharp pain twisted into her back. As she bent to reach around to touch what had caused the pain, a giggle emanated from the corner of her room. Before she could react, a pocket-sized terror sliced into her leg, causing blood to gush out of the wound. As the pain registered, she looked down at her leg to see a different goblin was holding the gash, trying to stop the bleeding. This one looked familiar? Anda couldn't believe her eyes, wondering for just a moment if she was hallucinating, although she hadn't lost that much blood. The small helper trying to stem the flow from her leg was Kofi. Her brother was alive, but he was now a goblin. How could this be? He looked at her sadly and told her this was a trap. These goblins were never going to accept a trade. Before Anda could process any of this, a red-eyed, wrinkled creature that smelled like rotting flesh came from behind Kofi and stabbed him in the back. It wrenched the tiny dagger upwards, exposing his ribcage. As her brother fell face down onto the floor in agony and shock, the attacker grinned at her, licking the warm blood off its fingers. Anda had never wanted to destroy anything as much as she wanted to hurt these goblins. They had taken Kofi, viciously maimed him, and now they were trying to murder her. She grabbed hold of her goblin brother, wrapping him in her dressing gown. Then, armed with the candles, she set fire to her sheets in a rage and threw them at the hordes of malevolent beings. Tiny screams filled the room as she stomped on them, crushing their little bodies. Her laugh was maniacal as the fire grew and grew. It soon spread throughout the house, destroying everything in its wake, along with her parents. Anda somehow survived the fire, only to be arrested and eventually convicted of a number of charges, including the death of her parents. Due to her young age and the troubling circumstances of her defense, she was sent to a special juvenile detention center called Crowswood, where she would get the special care the court said she needed to fix her delusions. There she was, surrounded by other children like herself, who also had stories of supernatural menace, carnage, and loss. To this day, Anda can be seen carrying an earth-filled jar with her around the estate's grounds, believing it holds the petite yet steadily healing body of her brother, Kofi.
Thank you so much, Miss Tananari, for that wonderful reading. It chilled me to the bone. And thank you so much to Anda for inspiring that story for us. Have you ever had any experiences with goblins or the fae? Tell us about them at somethingscary@snarl.com. Going back out into the world after being away from it was a lot to handle at first. I'm so grateful to therapy and programs like Talkspace to help me readjust. I just took my first vacation in a long time in late summer, and while it was fun to be away, there were lots of challenges, and I found myself feeling anxious and a bit out of sorts. I don't know how I would have gotten through the past year's intense changes if it wasn't for therapy. I think Talkspace is a great therapy option because of its convenience in scheduling and quick turnaround for scheduling appointments. You can start talking to someone on the same day you start. It's really easy to match with a licensed therapist and schedule a session, and you can also get unlimited messages with your dedicated therapist. If you need a little support to help you through the end of the year or want to start building towards a better upcoming year, Talkspace is here to help. Match with a licensed therapist when you go to Talkspace.com and get $100 off your first month with the promo code SOMETHINGSCARY. That's $100 off when you use code SOMETHINGSCARY at Talkspace.com. Even if you don't go looking for treats on Halloween night, the tricks just might come looking for you. Zara absolutely loved Halloween. This year, however, she decided she was too old for trick-or-treating. Her parents were disappointed and pleaded with her to go out with them and her little brother one last time. But Zara already had other plans. This year, her friend Jonica was coming over. They would do goth makeovers, watch horror movies, maybe even have a seance. She couldn't wait. On Halloween night, she bid her family goodbye, popped in a movie, and began to carve a pumpkin as she waited for Jonica. When the end credits rolled, she texted Jonica, who was now 2 hours late. Where could she be? It also occurred to Zara there had been no trick-or-treaters at the house yet. She jumped out of her skin when she heard a loud knock on the front door. Convincing herself it was unlikely to be a murderer, she took a deep breath and slowly walked to the door. A bead of sweat dripped down her neck. Almost at the door, she heard another knock and,
"Open up. Hurry. Open up."
It was Jonica. Zara breathed a sigh of relief. She unlocked it, chuckling for being so paranoid. But Jonica flew through the door and slammed it behind her. She was panting, almost hyperventilating, eyes wide and wild. Through her quickened breathing, she managed to get out the words, "It followed me." Zara had an uneasy feeling as she led her friend to the kitchen for some water. When she turned to hand it to her, Jonica was shaking in terror. She pointed right over Zara's shoulder. As she turned around, the glass fell from her hand and shattered. Pressed up against the kitchen window was a horrifying face staring into the house. It had deep sunken eyes and wrinkles so thick they looked like scars. Its teeth were mangled with rotten flesh hanging off the incisors. If it hadn't been moving, she would swear it was dead. The walking dead. She was frozen in fear, but Jonica snapped her out of it and dragged her to the bedroom where they locked themselves in. Zara was terrified. How could she be so stupid to think she was too old to trick or treat? She just wanted to be with her family eating candy. Then it hit her. Her family. She asked Jonica who else she saw outside. The streets should have been packed. But by the look on Jonica's face, she knew the answer. There was no one out. No one alive, at least. She choked back a sob when suddenly they heard a loud creak on the stairs. "Did you lock up again after I came in?" Jonica whispered, the fear in her voice evident. She stood by the bedroom door, listening intently. Zara couldn't remember. If she did, then it was probably just her parents having used the key, but if she didn't, they could hear the steps getting closer, slow, heavy steps. But they were hidden, and if they were quiet, maybe it would just move on. Zara was so thankful she wasn't alone. At least they had each other. Zara whimpered as she hugged her friend close, feeling a dampness on her cheek. When she slowly pulled away, she saw blood. Hidden beneath Jonica's hair, an unmistakable flesh wound from a bite was clearly visible on her neck. Zara, still trapped in her bedroom, began to slowly back away. Jonica's demeanor changed in a flash. Still blocking the only means of escape, she cracked a wicked smile, licked her lips, and whispered, "At least we have each other." This week's podcast stories were edited by Markia McCarty, Janine Pipe, and Sarah Lukasiewicz. Narration by Markia McCarty. Audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris. Additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman. Art and graphics by Mari Carlson. Produced by Hannah Mullen and Markia McCarty. Music by Sapphire Sandalo and Calvin Linderman.